Hello, and welcome to the Laddercast, where we teach you how to leverage your assets to change your life. I'm Sorsha Porter, and in 2016, I bought my first home, which completely changed the trajectory of my life. I turned that property into a business, a trip around the world, a new career, and quadrupled my household income. And now I'm a real estate agent licensed in Oregon and Washington.
And I'm Shannon McAllister. After finishing college with a degree in finance, I was in a job I hated but couldn't quit because I wasn't making enough money. I signed up for a class to learn about mortgages taught by a real estate investor. 17 years later, I'm a nationally licensed mortgage lender, homeowner, and investor myself. We aim to educate how getting on the property ladder by owning just one home can change lives. It changed ours.
Hello, welcome to the show. Today we are talking about self-employed borrowers and creative and alternative income earners, and the differences between financing a home when you don't work a standard full-time W-2 job. So
Totally okay.
And we want to tell you it's possible. It just requires different steps than maybe your friends who work a W-2 job and are like, well, I don't know. I just gave my paperwork to the lady and she said I qualified. So, Shannon, why is W-2 generally slightly more straightforward mortgage process than being a self-employed human?
Let's be fair, it is only sometimes a more straightforward process. There are W-2 people who earn all different types of pay grades, pay scales, all these things, which make it just kind of, frankly, equally as complicated. So none of y'all are getting off easy without scrutiny and examination, just so you know.
So don't let anyone tell you that it's going to be way harder for you if you're self-employed. It's not necessarily. It's just different.
It's just different. And the difference being is that you are responsible for your own taxes, which means that we are analyzing your tax returns and calculating the cash flow of you or your business to determine how much money you have to qualify with. If you are a W-2 human, taxes are already accounted for by your employer, and we are just looking at your pay stubs and pay checks at that point to determine your cash flow. If you are self-employed, you are doing those things at the end of the year, and we're determining your cash flow based on your tax return and what you've chosen to write off or not write off.
Now, when we're talking about self-employed humans, who are like, what does it mean if you are a self-employed human who is ready to buy a home? Are we talking about, Sarah who babysits and works part-time as a waitress and doesn't count her tips? Or are we talking about Jonathan who works gig work as a software engineer and maybe gets 4 or 5 1099s from 4 or 5 different companies?
It could be, frankly, none of them, depending on how tax returns are filed. And if Jonathan writes off all of the expenses, so at the end of the year, he shows he earns no money, he's not ready to buy a house. It could be both or it could be none. What we're most interested in is how much money you are earning and retaining after expenses relative to a mortgage in the area you want to live. Are you earning enough with your 1 contract job, your 5 contract jobs, your different gigs, your different hustles? Are the sum of those monies enough to support you, your required obligations, and a mortgage in the area you want to live? And have you been doing it consistently? There's the key to the world. Which is huge. Consistency and reliability is analyzed with every borrower. Don't feel that you are being singled out just because you file your tax returns differently than a W-2 human. Consistency and reliability is the name of the game for every person getting a mortgage. That is first and foremost, actually, above anything else. We need to know what you have been doing, because what you have been doing is an indicator of what you will do going forward. And what we need you to do going forward is to be able to pay that mortgage. So you need to have a couple of years really good, consistent history, and you need to prove in the current year that you are keeping up with that consistent history.
And so, for example, we're not really talking about full-time versus part-time. Underwriters are looking at the sum of income from all sources and whether or not it can support the cost of living with your mortgage, because we want to keep it. like we've talked about in other episodes, we want to keep that debt to income ratio under a certain percentage.
That is correct. I don't care if you earn all of the money in 4 hours of work per week, or it takes you 84 hours of work per week. That's your choice or your organization of how you earn that. We're not interested in the hours you're working. We're interested in how much money you're earning. And is that enough to do what you're trying to do?
Great. And then from that, the type of work, does what they do really matter as far as, can it be someone who, gigs as a creative, like a graphic designer or artist? Is there a difference? We have a lot of people here that work in the cannabis industry. Are they different from those who work in other industries that don't have federal regulations and things to think about?
Sure. I'm going to take that as a two-part question.
Yeah.
Consistency and reliability. If you were subbing as a baker last year and then this year picked up graphic design work, we're probably going to need you to be doing graphic design work for at least a year, probably two, consistently with consistent income before that income is considered stable going forward. So jumping totally different ships to be doing gigs and different things isn't ideal. Now, we can have a much more deep discussion about that because you certainly don't have to stay doing the exact same thing all the time. There are relational things amongst jobs that tie them together that are cohesive, right? Cannabis workers have a slightly different conversation. If you are a W-2 employee of a cannabis shop, you generally are fine for a mortgage. If you are the owner of a cannabis shop or an agriculture plant, we're going to probably have a different episode to share with you because there are a lot of different things to understand and know about that because of federal regulations. Mortgages are essentially federal products, and because there is federal regulation regarding that, you have a different situation.
Okay. Different episode when we talk about the cannabis industry and those who make their income.
Owners
have ownership in a cannabis cannabis industry versus employment. But what if you what are you looking for as far as taxes go when it comes to this? Because it sounds like a lot of this hinges on taxes and how your taxes and how you track your income looks on paper.
How you track your income, how you report your income to the IRS, it all hinges on that. The main difference between a W-2 salaried employee versus a self-employed person, again, is the tax situation. If you're W-2, your employer is paying your taxes out of your paycheck every month or week or whatever. If you are self-employed, you are responsible for paying your taxes at the minimum annually, probably quarterly, or something like that. And the only way we know how much money you've ended up with at the end of the year is by looking at the tax returns that you have filed with the IRS and doing calculations to determine the cash flow of your business. If you have written off everything to minimize your tax liability to the IRS, leaving you with effectively no income, now we have a problem because the costs, your write-offs, in our opinion, are the cost of running your business. And if you earn no income, then how in the world are you going to pay a mortgage?
And I think that that's really key because that is a strategy that a lot of people use who are self-employed. And, I think there's a mentality around that, I'm not paying any taxes. I'm working the system, and that's all well and good until you want to purchase property through borrowed funds. And so if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I would like to buy my own home, you really need to consider how your taxes are looking and maybe consult with an accountant or CPA about, well, I know that like this next year I'd planned to buy a home, but I didn't report much income on my last tax return. You might need to revise your tax return from previous years in order
Which doing so is going to make you have to pay taxes. If you revise your tax return and write off less, now you owe the IRS money.
So you're going to have to pay taxes from that year, which means that you need to be looking at what you have for your down payment that you've set aside and make sure that you've got enough money to pay those taxes, report your income, as well as, fund your loan.
Right.
So
right.
So
the name of the Yeah, the name of the game is being prepared, and it takes some preparation ahead of time because we look at 2 years of taxes. So you can't just pull up last year's taxes and be ready to go, you think, because we need 2 years. And so it generally takes planning. Self-employed humans need to plan well in advance in the years that they want to purchase a house to make sure that their taxes are tight and right to do what they're trying to do.
And if you work with someone like Shannon and you send her your stuff, she'll look at it and she'll tell you, this is the sort of thing I need to see. I noticed that you're writing a lot of stuff off. Like, do you have anything you could drop off of that to improve your income, and so on and so forth? And working closely with a CPA will be important to that. But another thing is you need to look at what the cost of living is in your area. So for example, here, the median price of a home, and that's everything from condos to single family homes, is around $520,000 to $550,000 right now in this time and day and time we live in. If interest rates continue to go down, that's going to change real quick here. But right now, that's about the cost of a home. And if you're sitting there listening to this and be like, well, how do I find that information out? Sorcia's a realtor. She would know that off the top of her head. I actually just Google it about once a week. That's how I know that number. I literally go on my computer and it's what's the average cost of a home in Portland, Oregon today? And it will pull right up. So if you live in Portland and you are making maybe less, let's say you're making $40,000 a year and you're living with roommates and you are fastidiously saving with goals to buy a home, just know that you're probably going to have to make more money in order to afford a house of your own to live in. Even though you're saving money, you've got money set aside, you've been really responsible, you need to make sure that your income can support the cost of, a starter home, which around now is about $400 to $450, depending on the neighborhood you want to be in. So
know those things. And unfortunately for self-employed humans, there's a few extra factors to consider.
Yeah.
There is how much money you make every year from wherever that's coming from, all the different jobs or hustles or contracts or whatever's going on, how much money you make in a year. If you are doing that, you are likely responsible for all your other expenses also. You are responsible for paying your healthcare every month. You are responsible for contributing to retirement funds and investment funds. You're not likely getting employer matches out of that business. So you're responsible for funding all that stuff that comes as benefits sometimes to other jobs that are salaried or W-2. So now we have our income, we have all of those required things to live. And now, after all of those things, how much money do we have left over to support a home? That's what we're looking at. And is that amount of money that you have enough to buy a house in the area you want to live?
And if it's not, it's okay. My husband and I, the reason we ended up here is because we were living in the San Francisco Bay Area where the median house cost was $1.3 million. And there was no way we were going to see owning our own home for years and years. And if you started going down this path and you're self-employed and you love being self-employed, I also feel like this might get a lot of self-employed people really down because being self-employed has it is hard. But the trade-off, at least for me, who is self-employed, because I am self-employed, the trade-off is that I have so much more freedom. I'm much happier in my life when I'm self-employed. I have done the 9-to-5 corporate thing and made a decent salary but I love being able to dictate how my day goes. Like there are way more non-financial benefits to being self-employed to me than there are, financial ones. Like if I was doing it strictly on financial, I probably wouldn't be self-employed. And I make decent money. But it's like, don't let that get you down. Just be aware of what your costs are and consider if I want to be self-employed where I am and buying a home is really important to me, you need to think about, well, how do I increase my income to make that possible? Or you need to think about, well, maybe this isn't the right place for me in the long term. And that's okay too. We moved from the Bay Area to Portland and we were able to buy our first home. That's why we did it. There is nothing wrong with saying, man, I am not making enough here in Portland to buy a home. But, there are cities like let's say Oklahoma City or Kansas City, Indianapolis, where you can buy a home for a price that is probably what you're paying in rent right now per month. And just home ownership is so valuable. The ability to stabilize your costs and get equity is so valuable, guys. Don't write off your ability to buy a home just because of where you physically live and what your current income is. You, especially if you're self-employed and you are remote, you can go wherever the fuck you want. You can go wherever you want to go. And just know that, like, we're not saying you're not going to be able to afford things if you're self-employed. We're saying, like, you need to plan a little bit more and you need to research what the cost is where you are and consider that when you're thinking about what you want to buy.
That is correct. That those things are all correct. The good majority of self-employed humans that I speak with, when they get the courage up to call me or text me to say, I think I'd like to think about a mortgage, it always comes with a caveat. But I'm super complicated. I'm self-employed. I have these things. I have it. I promise you, everybody has all the things. Even if you aren't self-employed, everybody has stuff that is unique and special to their situation that is all taken into account. Everybody's weird stuff is being taken into account equally. So there is nothing that is precluding you or preventing you from doing what you want to do. What it takes is knowing the process, what is required of you to get a mortgage, according to how you earn and report your money to the IRS. We're going to look at what you're doing now. We're going to look at what is required. We're going to look at where you want to go. And if you need to make changes or adjustments, which everybody generally does, we're going to tell you what those are. So that way we're putting you on a plan to get you to where you're going. And the main difference, one of the differences between the two types of earners is you have to have your tax returns in order for the last couple of years because, again, stability, predictability, what you've done in the past is an indicator of what you're going to do going forward, which really isn't any different than a W-2 borrower who has to still be proving stable and consistent job history over the last 2 years. We may just not need to see their tax returns because they're going to give us W-2s. Same concept, just different paperwork.
Right. Yep. And I think that when we talk about taxes, the biggest thing that, like, I think we want to drive home is you need to claim cash. You can't just write 100% of your income.
If you are earning, so these are things that we talk about. If you give me a call, send me an email, we're going to talk about those things. If you are earning tips, we got to be talking about what you're doing and how you're claiming tips and cash and other types of under the table monies that you're taking, which is part of why you're doing what you're doing, right? That's part of why you choose to do what you do. So if you don't claim it, I can't use it. If a good majority of your income is in tips and it's not coming through a credit card and on your pay stub and you're taking cash, then we might have to analyze that.
A lot of times people just don't think about that until someone's told them. You know, they're like, I make decent money. I mean, yeah, my base salary is meh, but I make a ton in tips. You just have to remember that when we're talking about how you document it. That's the biggest thing. I think that's the thing that surprises most people as well. Is they're like, well, I make good money. What do you mean I can't qualify? It's like, well, you didn't account for the 50% of your income that you make in tips or greater.
And these days, it's more down to credit card versus cash tips. Most credit card tips these days are run through your system and shows up on your pay stub for the most part. It's cash tips. So if a good majority of your income is cash, then we're just going to talk about it. And you're going to have to decide, where is it best put to use? Is it best put to use reporting it and paying taxes on it, or leaving it out and so you still earn enough money to do what you're trying to do with the house? And
you also, like, this would be a good time if you've been doing your taxes on your own to probably engage a CPA. The point in which anybody purchases a home is a good time to engage a CPA. Depending on if you are self-employed, it's a really good time to engage a CPA. Many of you, I don't know if I've talked about this on the show before, but I am the daughter, niece, and granddaughter of CPAs and cousin of a CPA. There are a lot of CPAs in my family. I managed my father's CPA firm for a while. I was his office manager. And so I place high value on that profession, not just because it afforded me, it paid for my college, but because I know how much help I see them give people, a lot of self-employed people in the process. And And if you're a business owner, a C Corp owner, this applies to you too, documenting this income. And there's like a couple of more things you're going to have to do as well, right, Shannon?
Yeah. And you're right. Professionals who know their job are worth their weight in gold. You don't know the tax code. They do. They can help you maximize your tax filings, both either an organization or actual tax dollars, tax liability, and help you do the best and right things for you. And if you're just winging it on your own, man, get some help. Winging it doesn't generally often work out to anybody's best favor. But yes, and part 2 of that question is, if you are organized in a way that you own a corporation or a partnership and you file a separate business tax return, for sure, I certainly hope that you have CPA help at that point. But that also does not preclude you from getting a mortgage. Same concepts applies, same examination analysis applies to both you and your businesses, because you are being funded by the businesses that you own. So we're going to analyze both to analyze the cash flow to make sure that the cash flow in your businesses is at a level that supports flowing to you, that supports the house that you're trying to buy. Same concepts, a little more paperwork.
That might mean you got to redo your taxes. It might mean that you got to redo your business taxes. So you need to account for the costs of those things as well as the money that you've already set aside for your home. I've seen it where people will come and I'll say, I'm ready to buy a house and I have saved just enough for my down payment and I'm ready to do this. And then they find out that, oh, shoot, I actually needed to report more income the last 2 years. So I've got to redo my tax returns, which costs money. And then I've got to pay the taxes on that, which costs money. So a lot of times that will deplete the funds, some of the funds that they accounted for in their down payment. And it's just a thing we want to make you aware of, because until you start going down this road, you just don't know what you don't know, right? Shannon is like, you don't know what you don't know. And
it could be that you choose not to refile. It could be that you choose to wait a year.
Yeah.
File your next year's tax returns differently to do those things. There's a lot of different options, and all you have to do is ask. Because just because you are self-employed does not mean you can't do this. You just need to understand how the system works and what the system wants out of you.
Now, Shannon, I have a question. How much longer does it generally take a person who is self-employed to get through the pre-approval process than someone who's W-2'd? And I know that there is going to be probably an equal amount of people who don't get all their documents into you in a timely fashion. But do you see, regardless of what their employment status is, but do you ever see, what kind of lead up time should we advise people who are self-employed to give themselves? Let's say they want to buy a house this summer. When should they start talking to you?
Right now. Right now. Please. There's never enough prep time. Leaving everything to the end creates a hassle and a hustle. Hustle's a good word for you, for me, for everybody. Let's not hustle if we don't have to. Let's be prepared and planned and measured. But the answer to that is highly dependent on you and how you do your record keeping and what you have, what you know about your taxes. I often talk to 2 different camps of people. I talk to self-employed people who either are a Schedule C solo entrepreneur or people who own businesses who file a separate business tax return and their personal return, who are on it, who often use bookkeepers, who have tax people already, and they just need to reach out to the people to get the copies of the documents that we need. These people often also are always on top of the year-to-date books. They are running QuickBooks and can print me off a year-to-date P&L with a click of a button because they are doing bookkeeping in current time. They know where their money is every month and they're reconciling, because part of the process of a self-employed person is ensuring that this year is on track with previous years. If you earned great money last year, but you've brought in no money this year, we've got a problem. So we always need to see what's happening year to date. And the people who are in the very organized, not necessarily organized, but they've been doing it long enough to know that these things are important to the success of their business and the financial viability of their businesses. So they're generally very on it with bookkeeping, often have bookkeepers, versus a second camp that I often talk to, which are maybe less involved businesses. They don't have all of the different cost centers and employees and contractors that they hire, but maybe you are just working real hard and earning lots of different 1099s every year. And at the end of the year, you aggregate them up and you work on your taxes. That, I find that camp of people often tends to have a little bit of a harder time because they maybe don't have it all organized right at that second. They most often don't have the year-to-date piece going. They wait until the end of the year to do all of their books because you often have very few expenses if that's the kind of deal you're doing, and that's cool. But there's generally a little more lead time and some more paperwork doing if you aren't already using a bookkeeper or aren't already being your own bookkeeper doing books every month. Was that a really long-winded answer? Did that make sense at all?
Yeah. No, it made sense to me. I mean,
you know taxes.
Listeners, does it make sense to you? Yeah. Tell us, shoot us a message. But it does make sense. And what I typically tell people when they meet me, because a lot of times I get a call from someone before they call a mortgage person. I'll get a referral and I'll sit down to coffee and we'll have my buyer introduction conversation where I talk to them about like what the process looks like and whatnot. And usually from that point to the point where we're closing on a house is around 100 days because it takes, a couple of weeks to get all your documents to your lender. It takes a couple of weeks for us to find a place. It takes 30 to, 60 days for closing. So, just consider that if you're thinking, I want to buy a house in May or June, you should start talking to Shannon now or your lender right now. You should be engaging a tax person. If you don't have those documents together, first of all, it is tax season. So this is a good opportunity for you to get those ducks in a row. But you also need to be aware that this is the busiest time of year for those professionals. And you're going to need to give them enough time to do their regular work during their busy time of the year, as well as help you get your house in order.
Yeah, you're going to be in a queue. And that 100 days, if you aren't ready, that could be extended. And that's cool too. It's the plan about what you have together, what you need to have had together. Where's the gap between where you are now and where you're going? And what is the plan to fill that gap?
Yes. So, in conclusion, before I conclude things, if you are wanting to know more about taxes and do a deeper dive on that subject, we are going to have a CPA. Surprise, it's my dad. We're going to have a CPA on our show, our first guest, I think around episode 3. So stay tuned. We're really excited to, get more in depth about who your financial team is this year. And we're going to talk to him about, small to mid-sized businesses and self-employed persons and real estate tax planning, because that's his area of specialty.
That's what he shines in. If all of the things we were talking about were just like, what? P&L. He's going to explain it to you in a tax way that makes sense, that feels good, that's going to leave you thinking like, all right, if I get some help, I can do this, which I hope is how you're leaving today with also. The point of it is you can do this. If you are self-employed, if you are a creative in this town or any town, you can do these things too. It is just a matter of how you organize yourself, how you organize your monies, what you're trying to do, and do all of those things line up? And if not, how do we make them line up?
Yep. Purchasing a home as a self-employed person just requires a little bit of additional preparation and considerations, but it's completely attainable and possible with the right help. So if you take nothing away from today, take that and know that we're here for you. We're always here for you. Please reach out to us on our website, theladdercast.com.
Do that. And I would love for this to go for the next self-employed person that I speak to, for it not to be caveated with, I'm real hard. I'm self-employed. I'm a real mess. Yeah. And I don't know that I could do this, because that is so not true for all of you.
It's totally doable. You just gotta put in the work. So
let's rip the Band-Aid and do that.
We're really excited that you came to listen to us today. Thank you so much. As always, check us out at theladdercast.com. Drop us a line, send us a message, and thank you for listening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.